We'll continue on then with our study regarding what is the end of all things we already discussed about in verse 7 of 1 Peter 4. Okay, so back to 1 Peter chapter 4. And as we looked at that, the end of all things, therefore they were, and the coming trials that they were to face, it's believed that this epistle is written about 64 or 65 AD, right before the destruction of Jerusalem, so that the trials that they were about to face really was at hand. It was just coming. So what was their attitude that they should take? If you look at 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 12, Beloved, think not strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened unto you. This was not going to be unusual, what they were to see. In Matthew chapter 5, did we go over this last week? Matthew chapter 5 and in Matthew 10. Let's look at Matthew 5, 10 through 12. It strikes our memory. Matthew 5, 10 through 12. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. We did cover that. Okay. Did we look at... No, there's some... Okay. Look at Matthew 10, verse 17. Matthew 10, 17. But beware of men, for they will deliver you up to the councils, and they will scourge you in their synagogues. And ye shall be brought before governors and kings for my sake, for a testimony against them and the Gentiles. But when they are delivered you up, take no thought how or what ye shall speak, for it shall be given you in that same hour what ye shall speak. This is inspiration by the Holy Spirit. For it is not ye that speak, but the Spirit of your Father which speaketh in you. And your brother shall deliver you up, the brother to death, and the father the child, and the children shall rise up against their parents and cause them to be put to death. And that's hard to imagine. Putting your own family up to charges. They're believers. They believe in Christ. And so they take them away and put them in jail, and they end up executing them. Or I say execute. Sometimes they were just torturing them. We read from the Tacitus about his writings about what Nero did to the Christians, and they really did. When a father would how do you say it? He just would tell on his own son. Can you imagine your children? When I was in high school, there was a class we all had to take before we graduated called Americanism versus Communism. I don't know if any of you had to take similar classes. It was a comparison. Actually, it was more than it was a comparison of the Russian system of the red communism, Marxist communism, actually Stalinist communism, as compared to the American system of our economy and our government. And it compared those and how, of course, how great we had it here, and how horrible it was over there. And one thing that I think this really happened under the Stalin and many of the other Russian dictators, the Soviet Union dictators, they would have their squads, the KGB squads, come take people away out of their house at night, in the middle of the night, because they were subversive. They were dissenters. They didn't believe in the communist regime. They didn't believe in Stalin and all that stuff. They wanted something else. And it got to where children would actually talk about what was going on in their own home, and the charges were being brought against their own parents. They would be spying on one another, as it were. Okay, and so I look at this and I can make a comparison that father will reveal his son. The son will, they'll end up their family. They'll be telling on their family, and they'll be taken away, and they'll be killed. And the brother shall deliver up the brother to death, and the father the child, and the children shall rise up against their parents and cause them to be put to death. This is talking about the trials that were to come. Okay, and ye should be hated of all men for my name's sake, but he that endureth to the end shall be saved. But when they persecute you in this city, flee ye into another. For verily I say unto you, ye shall not have gone over the cities of Israel till the Son of Man be come. The disciple is not above his master, nor the servant above his Lord. It is enough for the disciple that he be as his master, and the servants as his Lord. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebub, how much more shall they call them of his household? So Jesus was accused of being Beelzebub. Jesus was accused of being, aligned with Satan, falsely accused. And so if they did that to Jesus, they're going to do the same thing to his followers. Fear them not, therefore, for there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, and hid that shall not be known. So everything will come out in the wash in the end. On the last day, everything will be clear. All justice will be made. All justice will be made. But as Jesus was talking to them, telling them about the kinds of things to expect in the coming trials, and I think it correlates with what Peter's talking about in chapter 4, 1 Peter. That they should expect, that think it not strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you as though some strange thing happened unto you. And he says, but rejoice inasmuch as ye are partakers of Christ's sufferings, that when his glory shall be revealed, ye may be glad also with exceeding joy. We read from the letter to Pergamum, or Pergamos. I say Pergamum because that's the American Standard rendering. Pergamos is the King James rendering. I don't know if it's the same in the New King James. Okay. And so, as the promise was to them that if they were faithful to the end, even unto death, they'd receive that crown. So it is when they rejoice at the coming trials they were to see. Look at Acts 14. Acts chapter 14. Verses 19 through 22. And there came thither certain Jews from Antioch and Iconium who persuaded the people, and having stoned Paul, it's so understated. They came from Iconium, and by the way, they stoned Paul, and having stoned Paul, drew him out of the city, supposing he had been dead. Howbeit, as the disciples stood round about him, he rose up and came into the city, and the next day he departed with Barnabas to Derbe. And when they had preached the gospel to that city and had taught many, they returned again to Lystra and to Iconium and Antioch, confirming the souls of the disciples and exhorting them to continue in the faith, and that we must through much tribulation enter into the kingdom of God. So they were minded to, regardless of what happened to them, to teach the gospel and to encourage them to do the same. Can you imagine? Yeah, they took me out the city because they didn't like what I was teaching, and they stoned me, and they thought I died. They left thinking I died, so I got up. I left, and I'm teaching you here now to do the same thing, so you might very well be taken out the city and stoned. So go ahead, do it. There's only one reason they would do that, and that the reward is so much more greater. The reward is worth it. When we consider that promise that Christ has given us, a heavenly home with the Father, that's got to be so much greater than the kind of suffering that any of us would ever go through. I say any of us. There are places in the world that really are as bad as what we read about in 1 Peter chapter 4, that they really are killed for their faith. And they really are killed in a very disgusting way. We're very fortunate to live in a country where not only are people tolerant of our religious observances and our freedom to teach such and gather together and worship in the way that we see fit, but it's enforced, that rule of law. And it's supposed to be across the board. So we're very fortunate that we can come and worship the Father in a way that the Bible teaches us, and not be persecuted like that. There are other ways that people get at us other than beating us up. All right. So they were to rejoice in the trials that they were to face. Look at Acts chapter 5, verse 40. And to him they agreed. Talking about Gamaliel. Gamaliel made a speech about, in verse 34, talking about Gamaliel made a speech about punishing these men for teaching the truth. And he said, wait a minute, you remember when there was another false teaching that was going on. I say another, from his perspective, there was another false teaching going on that after a little while, it just went away. I say, but if it's of God, what are you going to do? Look at verse 38. And now I say unto you, Gamaliel speaking, refrain from these men and let them alone. For if this counsel or this work be of men, it will come to naught. After what they're doing, it's not going to follow through. It's just going to dissipate. But if it be of God, ye cannot overthrow it, lest haply ye be found even to fight against God. So he's warning them, if this is the truth, it's coming from God, what are you going to find yourself doing? You're going to find yourself fighting God. Just as Paul, when confronted by Christ on the road to Damascus, what did Jesus tell Saul of Tarsus at that time? It's hard to kick against the pricks. It's hard it hurts you, okay? When you think about, I'm not a farmer, but this is what I've read, this is what I understand. The old plows of that day, they would have, of course, I may have mentioned this before, where they have the plow, of course, is hitched up to the beast, whether it be an ox or a horse, and the plow has these little steel spikes or whatever coming around, bending around the opposite way, facing the beast, the animal, okay? And sometimes the animal gets ornery and doesn't like having to plow or whatever it does. It'll kick, right? It'll kick back at you. Of course, if you didn't have these pricks, it hurt you, it'd kick you. But as the animal kicks these pricks, these sharp spikes, they dig their legs into these, and it hurts. So it discourages the animal from kicking you while it's plowing. And that's what Jesus was telling Saul of Tarsus. It hurts to kick against the pricks. You're not doing yourself a favor by trying to fight against me. And so as Gamaliel is telling them, if it be of God, you're going to find yourself fighting God. In verse 40, and to him they agreed. And when they had called the apostles and beaten them, they commanded that they should not speak in the name of Jesus and let them go. Now what did they do? And they departed from the presence of the council, rejoicing that they were counted worthy to suffer shame for his name. And daily in the temple and in every house they ceased not to teach and preach Jesus Christ. So in spite of the maltreatment from the authorities, they rejoiced that they were beaten up. They rejoiced that they were counted worthy to suffer like this, and they continued to teach the very thing that got them in trouble to begin with. Okay, but the idea being that they rejoiced that they were counted worthy to suffer, as Peter writes to those in 4:13, 1 Peter 4:13, they should rejoice in their trials. Look at James chapter 1, verse 2. My brethren, count it all joy when ye fall into diverse temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. Here James is saying you can take something that's trying your faith and turn it to your advantage. In the sense that when we're suffering because of our faith, it's no fun. Okay. But James is saying, in spite of, we know it's no fun, but in spite of this, you can turn it to your advantage, knowing this, that the trying your faith worketh patience. So we can gain patience or steadfastness. But let patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. So we can use this as an opportunity to become steadfast. Show and let our, when you take a test in school about the material you've covered, And you don't know if you've actually learned it till you take that test, right? And so you don't know how much your faith is until you're put to the test. I saw a documentary some time ago about the Titanic. And the question has always been, did the Titanic have faults in its hull? Was the steel able to withstand? Were the rivers able to withstand the kind of forces? Did they meet the design criteria, or was it the material less than what? Were there faults in it? Did it take shortcuts in making it? We read about how when they build roads, sometimes they'll take shortcuts and use materials that aren't suitable. Well, so they took some steel with the same specs. They took and they handmade these rivets like they did in 1911 when they were making the Titanic. And they put them together and they put it under this pressure machine. Provided tons and tons of pressure to determine if the steel and the rivets could withstand the pressure. Because there was always the doubts, by those that had questioned the strength of the Titanic, if it should not have sunk. So they put the steel, the same kind of steel, and they assembled these pieces of steel together like they did in 1911 to build this Titanic with the rivets and everything, handmade rivets. And then they put it under the pressure of these tons of pressure, and they washed it, and it held. It held through the pressure. It held for far more pressure. It held more pressure than what it was designed to, okay? So they proved to themselves that the hull of the Titanic was sufficient by design standards. In fact, it was like a battleship. The Titanic's hull was like a battleship. So they put to rest that argument that the Titanic that was made with inferior products, okay? But they wouldn't have known that until they put it to the test. Until that force was applied to that steel, they wouldn't have known. And so, as it is with our life and our faith, how much is our faith? They say we don't know what we're going to do until we're faced with something like that. We don't know how we're going to deal with something life-threatening until we're faced with it directly. We can think about it and say, yeah, I'm going to do this or that, but until we actually do, we don't know. And so it is with their faith in those days and our faith today. We don't know how strong our faith is until we're confronted with the test. So in this case, as James is writing, you can take these trials and turn to your advantage in learning and developing steadfastness, patience. Okay, look at 2 Timothy 4. Verses 7 and 8. I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. Paul writing to Timothy, Paul knew that his death was very close. Paul very well knew because he was going to be put to death. He's going to be executed because of his faith and his teachings. And he knew that. He says, and as he's writing to Timothy in anticipation of what was coming, he says, I have fought the good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. He's been faithful to Christ in all his doings. Okay. Henceforth, because of that, there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give me at that day. And not to me only, but unto all them also that love his appearing. So he goes on to say, do thy diligence to come shortly unto me. It goes with some more typical, as we would write letters to our own friends. But as he's writing to Peter, my time is up. But you know what? I've been faithful to Christ, and therefore I'm looking forward to that crown. And I'm not just me. It's not just I'm that going to receive these rewards, this crown. But anybody who loves the Lord's appearing. In the sense that, Jesus taught us, how did Jesus teach us to look? In these days and times, or since, the parable of the householder. Remember what that was? you had a man that was given charge over a household, and while the master was away, what did he do? He started slacking. He started being mean to the servants, beating them, okay? Well, he didn't take the master's appearing seriously. He didn't think he'd come. When he came, he got his comeuppance, as it were, as the statement goes. So when we're taught to look, to watch and pray, we're taught to be ready when Christ returns, because we don't know when it's going to happen. And we should always be ready for that. And so as we love his appearing, we've prepared. As those virgins, those 5 wise virgins had made their preparations, they got sufficient oil to last them through the night. The 10 foolish virgins, they didn't make adequate preparations. All the virgins made some preparations. Only 5 of them made adequate preparations. And when it came time for the endurance aspect of waiting for the door to be opened came, well, those 5 foolish virgins not having made the adequate preparations, when the endurance came, they didn't have the oil they needed. They had to go buy some. So it is, as we make our preparations, we need to make preparations for the endurance. Okay, we need to make preparations. We're ready when Christ returns. And so I think that's what he's talking about. Those that love his appearing is not, it's those that love it with the idea and anticipate that we need to make adequate preparation. We're ready, okay? So that crown of righteousness is reserved for all of us who love his appearing and have made adequate preparations. Okay. Look at Revelation 2:10. We went over this morning. Be thou faithful unto death. Revelation 2:10. Fear none of those which thou shalt suffer, those things which thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison, that ye may be tried. And ye shall have tribulation 10 days, and be thou faithful unto death, to the point of death. And I will give thee a crown of life. He's talking about the tribulation, the trials they would have, and they're going to kill them. Now, and so as we consider, if we're ever confronted with a situation that our faith and if we continue to confess Christ, that we'll be killed, what are we going to do? That's a good question, isn't it? That's something I hope I'm never confronted with, because I'm not sure how it would happen. I'm a sissy. You know, I would hope that I could be prepared. And there in this course we talk about our relationship with God and praying for the strength and the resolve to do what we need to do.
I think a lot of it too is the preparation that we do, like you say, if we don't set our mind toward what we are going to do, you know, that we're determined to do this, we're determined to do this, and if we don't have that determination when we are faced with these trials, we aren't going to stand up.
Right. And it's a progressive thing, isn't it? You aren't, bam, all of a sudden you're just ready to die for your faith. That's not what happens. Look at the life of Abraham. When he was wandering about in the land that was promised to him, at first he was concerned about the threats that were coming from around him. He'd go to this area, and he told his wife, Sarah, look, when they ask you, don't tell them that I'm your husband. Tell them I'm your sister. You're my sister, okay? Because if you tell them you're my wife, they're going to kill me so they can have you for themselves, okay? Well, we see that in that half lie, she was actually his half sister, okay? And yes, surprising, huh? Things are different in those days, okay? And she was actually his half sister, so it wasn't quite a real lie in his idea, his impression. But it was a lie, yeah. She was his wife, you know. And, you know, the kings, they put their very lives in peril because they took them into being part of their harem, or they were going to marry them. And God told them, don't touch her, you know. And when they learned what had happened, and they sent Abraham, get out of here. Get out of here. You scare us, you know. And this he did twice. But as time progressed, his faith grew to the point to where he was convinced that when God demanded that he sacrifice Isaac on the altar, he was convinced that Isaac would be resurrected. You know, Isaac was the son of promise. Isaac was the one through whom the Christ would come. Isaac was the one through whom his heirs would come and that they would inherit that land. He was the one that God had made all these promises, through whom the promises would be fulfilled. That Abraham knew he wasn't going to inherit that land himself. He knew he was wandering about on it, not his own land, but that his descendants would inherit it. But he'd have to have descendants. Okay? So he knew that, and that Isaac being the sole son that was the one of promise, that is through him that God would fulfill his promises to him. So he had confidence and faith that God was fulfilling his promises, that even though that Abraham sacrificed Isaac on the altar, it seemed that he had the faith that God would resurrect him. But he was minded to kill him. As the scriptures reveal to us in Hebrews chapter 11, that Abraham sacrificed Isaac on the altar. Well, we know that the angel stopped his hand, right? But Abraham was going to do it. He was going to do it. Okay. So that's why Hebrews tells us he sacrificed Isaac on the altar. So, but he didn't get there all at once. If you look at the progress of Abraham through the events of the book of Genesis, that he got there over a period of time. And as our faith grows, as we study more, our resolve to serve God more, our conviction and our there is a resolve that people can have, that no matter what confronts them, they're going to do this or they're going to do that, you know. And so it is with the threat that they had in the first century of their very lives. They had that resolve, and they were going to stick to it. And we don't get there all at once. It's over a period as our faith grows. How does our faith grow? And what do we do to grow our faith?
You haven't tested. You haven't tested.
Okay. Okay. That's a good point. But what do? Go out and get people to test you? Become testy?
No, just live around the world. I said just live in the world. That's an easy enough way to get tested.
Okay. We know the power of prayer, right? We know that in prayer, our
Pray for something you'll have tested. Patience.
okay. And pray for prayer of patience, and I want it right now. Right? No. And then we also know the importance of study. Okay, the importance of study. And we also know the importance of fellowshipping with our brethren, encouraging one another. You know, the same mind, the same judgment, and that we're encouraged by all that to be found faithful in God, faithful in Christ. So all these things work over a period of time. Our faith increases. Okay, having ourselves tested. There are people that think, I need to be tried. So they make sure that somebody's going to give them a problem, okay? Because, their stand on things is so solid, and what they end up doing is irritating other people. And so then they assume that the retaliation they get, that's just suffering for Christ, right? What they've done actually just made an enemy, you know? Rather than persuading them, they just aggravated them.
And the stronger you are and the more you speak out against wrong and evil, the more you're probably going to be looked down on actually by today's standards, world standards. And the more you're going to be looked down on, and then the more you, sorry, I lost my thought. I guess that's it.
Well, we all want to hear bold proclamation of the gospel message. We want unabashed, unadulterated, clear, concise, simple, plain teaching from the Word of God. That's what saves. We know that. And we want to hear that from the pulpit. Absolutely. And so bold preaching should come.
Or you're going to be persecuted.
Yeah. Will you be persecuted? Well,
When you're speaking out.
okay.
And what's right. And,
Yeah.
And being tested. And once they realize where you stand, then you're going to probably be persecuted more.
Okay. Well, yeah. But that comes from just boldly proclaiming from, the gospel. Okay. And, we talk about preaching the truth in love. And that doesn't mean you're soft-spoken and all that stuff, But with the intent of the gospel saves, and only the gospel saves. And anything other than the gospel does not only saves. If it's something other than the gospel, the true gospel, that won't save. And people's lives are at stake. People's souls are lost, and they hear bits and pieces that they like to hear, but it's not everything that they need to know to do and the things to do. And so to boldly proclaim the gospel is to make it clear what the Bible teaches and to insist that this is what all need to be doing. Why? To save your souls. Okay. That can bring retaliation. That can bring persecution. But that's not making yourself their enemy. That's not just being a pest. That's just boldly preaching. But then but I guess what I'm saying is, as much as we want to stand for the truth, there are sometimes good ways. Look at the Muslimless Shovel book. Randall's very effective in reaching Mike. He wasn't in his face, Rather, he was bringing Mike around to letting Mike learn and understand for himself what the Scriptures teach. Okay. All right. Look, verse 14, 1 Peter 4:14. If ye be reproached for the name of Christ, happy are ye, for the Spirit of glory and of God resteth upon you. On their part he is evil spoken of, but on your part he is glorified. All right. They were to realize God's presence in their trials. Think about that. Does God want us to face trials? Yeah, He does.
More than what we are able.
Yes, that's right. What we're able to bear. He knows the outcome of it. The outcome, if used right, can be good. The outcome of trials and fiery trials can be good. And so we need to realize, they were to realize, and we should realize too, that God's presence was in their trials. Look at Hebrews 13, 5 and 6. Let your conversation, let your daily walk be without covetousness, and be content with such things as ye have, for he hath said, I will never leave thee, nor forsake thee, so that we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper, and I will not fear what man shall do unto me. Is that true? Do we really believe that? Or do we pine away because something bad happens? Oh man, I just lost my job. What am I going to do? Well, Jesus talked about in the Sermon on the Mount, when he talked about worrying about what we were going to eat or wear, what did he say about all that? Your Father in heaven knows you need all these things. And so long as we seek his kingdom and his righteousness first, all these things will be added unto us. So, and as we consider this attitude, so that we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper, and I will not fear what man shall do unto me. That's an attitude of complete faith. He will never leave us nor forsake us. Doesn't mean we're not going to face something bad events in our life. That's not what it means. But whatever happens to us, in the end, we're still going to be, God will be faithful. We are His. Okay. Look at Hebrews 12, 1 through 12. Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses. Looking back to chapter 11, that's sometimes referred to as the Great Hall of Faith. Various men and women of the Old Testament showing their faith and their actions. Their faith and action showed their faith. And so as they are witnesses that you consider think of an arena, a sports arena, okay? And you got, say it's the and you got the running, the track around in the center of the arena. You have all these people in the stands, and as the athletes run their race. Let me see, I'd go at about now, don't I? It's about time to quit, isn't it? Okay, let me finish this point. As the athletes go to run their race, the crowd is up there, go, 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 encouraging them to go on, to spur on, to continue that, to finish that last few steps. Because, as you're running all out of energy. You've given everything you've got, and you're ready to collapse. You just have a few yards to go, and they're going, go, go, go. Aren't you encouraged to go on? And so as this writer writes, wherefore seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, all these people of great faith who express their faith, saying, go, 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 you can finish this. Let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us. Of course, he goes on through more verses, but that's the main point. Think about, as those who lived in the Old Testament, as we read about them, and the great acts that express their faith in God. And so that should encourage us to run on this great race we have of the Christian life, to look forward to that reward in heaven. We'll continue more with the following verses, 1 through verse 12 on this next week. Appreciate your comments and your attention.